there was a time when I would say that the bulk, the numbers, and surely the important leadership of the Jews were in Babylonia. This was the place where the biggest number of Jews lived, and in which you had a Jewish community, a creative Jewish community that was in a way leading all the others. The rest of the people were periphery. Some of them were living, as I say, in those times, say around the year 1000. There were Jews already in most parts of Western Europe. Jews were in Germany from the 2nd century in Germany. Jews were living in France before it was called France. In fact, Jews came to Germany before the Germans came to Germany. The Germans came to Germany later, and when the Jews came there, there were Goths, Ostrogoths, Westgoths, but they were not Germans. The Germans came in a way later. So Jews came there before. In France, it was surely the same thing. The Jews came to France when it was Gallia, Gaul. The Franks that made French called this name came much later. So Jews lived in France before the Frenchmen lived there. But anyway, Jews were there, and Jews were in Greece and Italy, and of course in Spain. So there were Jewish communities in Europe, and there were Jews in Egypt and in North Africa. But these Jewish communities they considered themselves, and they were practically, perhaps some of them did very well financially or in other ways, but culturally they knew that there is a center, and this is a center. It wasn't like Mitzion etc., but it was very, very similar to it. The center was from Psur and Pumbedita comes the Torah. And we, say in North Africa, or we in France, or we in any other country, we are just disciples. We receive their messages, we receive their orders, we receive their whatever they have to tell us to do. That is what was. So it was for many years, and I say you spread slowly, sometimes willingly, because it seems that we have, as people, we have some kind of a certain bone, a certain nervous part of our nature is that we are not sitting very quietly in one place. We have something what they call itchy, and we move into other places, and in many times it was our choice. I mean, we were kicked out of so many places. I mean, the number of places for which Jews were exiled is huge. Countries, cities, and so on. So Jews were exiled, and they fled into other places. So in about this year, there were already some beginning of a Jewish community in Ukraine, and some were living around in what they call Czechoslovakia, or Czech, in Bohemia of the time. So there were Jews all over the world. But all these communities were not only small, but basically all the Jewish nation was at that time. The numbers were not very big, but basically they were peripheral influence, peripheral in knowledge, and they saw themselves as disciples, as followers of the big leaders. But with the time, some of these places established some kind of not only of identity or language, but established something of their own culture. It grew slowly, not intentionally, because somebody, let's say that the Jews that came into the, it was not then it was one big country, and the difference between France and Germany was unnoticed. But in the borderline, I say in the line between those places, there was a growing Jewish community, and this growing Jewish community began with sporadic writings of one person, another person, but it grew, and with the time, it got its own nature. See, I won't say that Jews became Frenchmen, but Jews became, unlike, let's say, the Jews in Mesopotamia and many other countries that spoke Arabic. Those Jews had their jargon that was French. So the French jargon was a part when Rashi wants to mention, to explain a word that he doesn't have really an Hebrew equivalent, or people don't know the Hebrew equivalent. He uses what they call the tongue of the language of the country, the laws of that country. So you have French there now. This French, incidentally, because historically speaking, most of the Ashkenazi Jews went to France in a certain period of time. We carried with us, as Ashkenazi Jews, we carried not only what I call some of the personality, some of the development, we carried also a part which was of the language. So we have little remnants of French in the Ashkenazi Jewry of all time. Now, you possibly, many Ashkenazi Jews never know that they speak French. But cholent is surely a French word. See, that is surely French. Cholent is French. It's French. It's one of the things that came to us, and a number of proper names. I've written a little piece about it. That the name, if you know a Jewish name, a Yiddish name, that is, it remained mostly with women, but not only. A name like Yente. You possibly heard the name Yente. It is a name. It's a proper name. It's not a nickname or a funny name. It's a name, a real name. But it remains still in France. It's a French name, basically. And in French now, it's just pronounced differently because the French changed the language. And because the French changed the language, now they call the same word, the same name. Gente is now called in France Jeannette. So if you see any gente moving about you should know that she's really a French lady called Jeannette. And there are similar things like this. But I mentioned it not just to tell you that there were things like this, but people began there was a beginning of a culture.